Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today.
You know, Billy, today we have two organizations that we work with a lot. And then we also have some very informational information, I guess you would say, about some cicada damage and things that's going on out in your woods. I know they're like everywhere. We've had people.
Yes.
I'm like the invasion of the cicadas.
Yeah, so excited about today's show. Thank you all for being with us. We have two first-timers. Love having first-time guests on here, but we brought some heavy hitters too, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've got Mr. James Wright. He is the new director of the Kentucky Forest Industries Association. But many of y'all may know James. He's had some history here in the state, but we'll hear a little bit more from James and what's going on with KFIA here shortly. And we also have Mr. Mike Silliman. He's the current president of the Kentucky Association of Consulting Foresters, and he's going to be talking about that organization and how they serve woodland owners as well. And then, as you mentioned, we're going to be talking about cicada damage out there. We have Dr. Ellen Crocker and Dr. Jonathan Larson will be joining us a little bit later to kind of speak to what's going on out there in the woods and some of the impact that the cicadas are having on our trees. And I would say overall, maybe don't worry too much, but maybe locally there may be some issues that could be problematic.
We'll find out.
Yes. We'll wait for the experts to kind of let us know. But we really appreciate y'all being with us today. If you have any questions for our presenters, please use the chat function. And if you're a YouTube watcher, thank you, or a podcast listener, thank you. You can hit us up via email at forestry.extension@ukyi.edu, and we can get back to you that way. But really delighted to be with you, Renee, on this beautiful day here in Lexington, Kentucky, with two first-time guests talking about really great stuff. Let's go trees, right? Yeah.
Billy's all excited. He gets really excited about first-time guests, as you all know if you've watched the show at all. So let's go ahead and get started. James, if you want to turn your camera on.
Welcome.
You're new to the show, but you're not new to us.
No.
Absolutely not. Good morning.
Good morning.
So glad to have you, James.
So glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to talk about today. I know you're in a new, exciting role, right? I mean, we've worked with you before in the past in a different kind of role, but now you're in a new one.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the Kentucky Forest Industries Association. Give you kind of an overview of what we do and some of the new directions we may be heading in. Again, relatively new to this position, but not new to forestry in the state.
Not at all.
Again, I've been in 7 weeks, so we're still new to this, but we've got a lot of things moving already, and I'm excited. So I'm excited about today and excited about getting the word out.
Yeah. Well, James, I think for at least a year, you'll get to say, well, I'm pretty new here. So
yeah,
right.
Not young.
Yeah. Oh, no. Thanks for being here, buddy. Yeah.
No problem.
You can go ahead and share your presentation if you'd like. It's trying to load. There it goes. Perfect.
Gotcha.
All right. So anyway, again, James Wright with the Kentucky Forest Industries Association. Just a little bit about, my history, and sorry about that, and some of my experience. There we go. So for many of y'all that do know me, I spent the majority of my career straight out of the University of Kentucky with the Division of Forestry. Along the way, I was a forester, chief forester, and all those great things that culminated in the director and state forester in the latter part of my career. So again, a lot of time working Kentucky's forests, a lot of times working with UK Extension and actually KFIA during that position, and had the pleasure of running the agency at the end until I'd had enough, and then I retired. And so shortly thereafter, I started working with the National Association of State Foresters as their forestry partnership coordinator. Great experience there working with NRCS agreements and things of that nature. I actually still contract with them at this moment. So I'm excited to be able to continue to work nationally and also here within the state. And then, of course, with the association, I began on May 1st. Again, had worked alongside Bob Bauer, the previous director, for many, many years. KFIA was extremely lucky to have Bob be its executive director for 30 of the 60 years of existence. So again, big shoes to fill. I did know him. I did have a lot of connections already. So we're excited about some of these opportunities to move forward. Just our history, we just celebrated our 60th year, established in 1965. Pretty much what we do is we serve the wood industry. We advocate at the local, state, and federal level. We want to also advocate for, private landowners, state lands, and federal lands. So that's pretty much anything that has to do with the wood industry in the state. We want to represent that and hopefully promote what's best for that particular entity or stakeholder. we preserve traditions, markets. We want to influence a lot of the organizations that have to do with the wood industry. So you'll see I'll sit on a lot of boards and speak at a lot of different conferences, a lot of workshops and seminars, because we want to, again, build those partnerships and help represent those folks that have a stake, some kind of stakeholding in our wood industry. And then our values, we obviously want to, we want to innovate, be on the forefront of innovation, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. Responsible forestry. We want to promote sustainability, management, all those great things that come along with initiating and growing, our growing stock, and knowing that that's owned by the majority of private landowners in the state of Kentucky. Educational opportunities, both for the public and our membership. We want to ensure that we're doing our part to educate the public on, again, management, industry, economics, and things of that's related to the wood industry, but also our membership, so that we can expand their horizon, not just dollars and cents when it comes to their particular business, but also where the product is initiating, what the management that's involved in that, and then how they're cutting or in things of that nature can impact that growth. So we're heavily involved in that. And then accountability and responsibility. We hold our members to the, we want them to conduct their business very sound, sustainable practice, because we want to maintain, our resources here in the state. So a few of the things that we do, many of y'all are probably familiar with the Master Logger program. We help support that. We provide some teaching within that. We happen to have Heaven Hill Distillery here in the state who sponsors our initial members. So any of the loggers that want to go through that, Heaven Hill will pay their first year and as a member of the Master Logger program, give them a care package. We support we absolutely need the support of the industry like that to help us get this program up and running. And then that leads into the Kentucky Forest Conservation Act, which are a lot of different environmental laws that the loggers and things have to follow. We will help mitigate some issues if they have any on site. We will help provide insight to maybe solve some issues before they become a problem. And then we will work hand in hand with the Kentucky Division of Forestry to ensure that those jobs are put in compliance and are in good standing when those loggers leave the site. The landowner education and support. Again, we work a lot with extension. A lot of the woodland owner short courses we may participate in, the field days we may participate in. And then obviously the Master Logger will help with anything and everything needed on that. The Wood Expo, here's a plug. In September this year, we have the Wood Expo coming to Lexington. We do this about every 2 years. And this year we're trying to build out that capacity to include a lumberjack competition. We haven't had that in a very long time in the state of Kentucky. We're excited about that. We appear to have a lot of participants that are interested. We have a lot of sponsors we've already have lined up for that particular event, but it is a 2-day event on September 19th and 20th. We welcome anyone and everyone to come out and view this. This expo is for us to showcase our industry. We'll have a lot of machinery out there. So the folks that may not have seen a log skidder or a knuckle boom loader or a sawmill, wood miser sawmill, or seen a lumberjack competition, things of that nature, arts and crafts. Very fun time. Very excited to host it this year. And again, it's very important because it kind of leads into the next thing, which is our 501c3 foundation, which is Log a Load for Kids. Half of the proceeds from the expo go to support Log a Loads for Kids, and that is we do our donation to the Shriners Hospital here in Lexington. We're extremely proud to say that we just crossed the $1 million mark on donations. That was something that Bob Bauer was very passionate about, and he was able to get that across the line less than a month before his retirement. So that was, we're very proud of that. We're going to have a celebration with Bob involved out of July 3rd at the Shriners Hospital. So again, very excited about the charitable donation part of that, and we would love to see you at the expo. As far as moving forward, the inheriting what we've done for so many years, we've traditionally advocated for the timber industry, the wood industry, and all associated folks with that. But as we move through the future, we would like to start looking to expand our footprint with KFIA. We're going to start branching out and possibly getting more involved in grants and administrative grants so that we can help support UK Extension, the Division of Forestry, maybe even the Tennessee Division of Forestry, and a lot of special projects that you all may have heard of, such as the White Oak Initiative. Things that we can do to help sustainability of our forest and the products associated with that. So my point of view and the things I'm sharing with my board is that we want to become more involved in those type of programs. We want KFA to now be a leader in helping, expand out education and outreach, management activities and things of that nature, education for our loggers, better in, BMPs and things. So you will see a different maybe version of KFA moving forward. You'll see us more involved and more present in areas that you may not have seen us before. But again, I feel that we need to have that presence. We need to be a leader in forestry in the state of Kentucky. And we happen to have, the membership to support that and the folks on board to get that done. So again, thank you for having me aboard. Any questions I can take now or later, but Renee, that's all I've got.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. We do greatly appreciate that. Yeah, wonderful job. And getting it more involved and, with landowners and, helping with us too. I mean, we've always been with KFIA, but, the more we can help landowners and the more we can get out there, the better off we all are.
And I think personally, just with the relationship I already have with you all and existing relationships, this is a very easy transition for me. Again, so I'm excited about that. We're not building new partnerships; we're just starting different ones. So I'm excited about that.
We're excited as well. A big thanks to Bob and all he did. But James, we're excited about this new direction that KFIA is looking at, and we're really wanting to be there with you all and kind of because we're all in this together, right?
Absolutely.
We all need to support our woodland owners and the industry that they depend on. So yeah, I'm excited about it as well, bud.
And I've already got James booked for a show for Wood Expo, so y'all expect that in September.
Yeah. Make sure y'all put it on your calendars. Come out and join us. UK Forestry Extension has a number of programs that'll be part of that as well. We'll have our students out there as well participating, and all kinds of activities. You'll hear more about it, but it'll be a great experience for us all.
I know we had some of the Woodland Owner Short Course people on here from last night. There's going to be a whole hour of tree ID at the expo. So, Billy and Lori will be leading that. So, y'all need to sign up. All right. Thanks, James. We greatly appreciate you being on here.
Yep. We'll see you soon, bud.
All right. This is awesome. So moving on, we have someone else that can also help landowners. Mike, if you want to turn your camera on.
Another first timer, really.
I know, it's exciting.
Welcome, Mr. Silliman. Glad to have you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Or Thomas, sorry.
Mike and I have known each other a very long time. So, Mike, it's great to have you on the show today, and appreciate you. And you got a kind of a new role, more or less, with the Kentucky Association of Consultant Foresters. You're their leader currently, right?
Currently, yes, that's the case.
Yeah, I love it.
We get a lot of questions, Mike, about, I know kind of what a consulting forester does, but I don't know why would I contact one? And so I thought, you know what, you could kind of answer all those questions and let us know, let our landowners know exactly what a consulting forester is for one and why they would contact you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Sure.
So I'll go ahead and share this.
Wonderful.
Okay, good. So again, I'm Mike Silliman. I'm the chair for the Kentucky Association of Consulting Foresters. There's 19 accredited foresters in our organization currently, and we kind of span all across the state. I'm gonna talk a little bit about what a consulting forester is, and these are the criteria that are required to be certified as the consultant forester. There's a national organization that is based out of Virginia, and there are several chapters within that organization. We are the Kentucky chapter of the National Association, and in order to be in a consulting forester role, you have to have 5 years of experience as a manager of forest. We have a lot of criteria of like continuing education to maintain our membership, keeps up to date with what the current conditions are and what practices are occurring in the forest. And then we also have peer and client references that are required for you to be a member. So you have to know other consulting foresters and have worked with them. And then we also have a very strict code of ethics. So that kind of goes over the qualifications. This is kind of an outline of how we're represented as a national organization across the U.S. Kentucky's chapter is one of 35, I think, or 24, I'm sorry. But we have representation in most of the United States. Some of these states are not as forested, and some of them just don't have chapters that they've started. Let's see. This is the flyer that we use. This is all the foresters that are registered in Kentucky. This is available on our website as well, which is KYACF.org. You can get onto the website, and there's a map that shows you where we're located. Obviously, whatever county that your property's in, you probably want to work with a forester that's geographically desirable. But all of us do travel quite a bit, as this is the nature of our job. So you can feel free to contact any one of us, and we refer each other in cases where geographics are a challenge. Some of the things that we do as consultants, it marries along with KDF. The Division of Forestry in Kentucky. I'm a previous KDF employee, as James mentioned. I didn't have quite the years in. I only worked there for 10 years, but they kind of work hand in hand. We work hand in hand with each other. KDF provides a service, and then we can take that service just a little bit further, as we are private business people and have a lot of freedoms and liberties to kind of work with you on certain situations that KDF is kind of allowing from. But one of the things we do is write management plans for private landowners, and municipalities and other agencies, even in some cases. This is an example of what a management plan kind of looks like. We'll take your property, divide it up into areas, management units, and then within those units, we'll take a diagnosis of what's occurring, what we discover while on site. And this is the data sheet on the right is kind of like a synopsis of the data that we collected, so that it kind of overviews what's occurring, the species composition, your footage per acre, all of that kind of stuff. And then beyond that, which I don't have on a slide, is a set of recommendations. So we talk with each landowner, what are your objectives for this property? How can we help you get to that? And then we'll cater recommendations specific, to those objectives. Another service we provide is basis appraisals, or just an appraisal. So if you want to know what's going on in your woods and what it's worth, on a fair market value kind of scenario, we come out and we'll inventory your forested property. We take that data and we'll use current market values of species based upon grades, and give you an appraisal of what approximately your timber is worth standing. And that's a commonly used practice, especially with people buying properties. If you just buy a property, much like a stock, you get a basis. So when you buy that property, that's what you paid for the timber. When you go to sell it, you only pay the difference in taxes, the difference from the basis to the sale price. So it saves you a lot of money on taxes if you are into harvesting or do have future plans of harvesting. Some of the other services we provide is timber sale administration, like we kind of just talked about. That we will develop, we will cruise. We can oversee logging sites, kind of like James said, with the laws that are in place as far as B&P installation. The consultant can work directly with the logger to ensure that all these things are implemented on site. If there are issues that arise during the sale or during the cutting, the consultant acts as a representative of the landowner and can go in between and make sure and verify that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and only cutting what they're supposed to be cutting, and all of that good stuff. This is kind of an example of a timber sale map. So when we develop a sale and put it out on the market for sale, we'll develop a prospectus, and that kind of gives an outline to the buyer, or i.e. logger, what's out there, what they can expect to see, what we've marked in a lot of cases with paint. We'll give them egress and ingress kind of scenarios where we would like them to yard, try to minimize the disturbance, on the overall property, so that you're not having a big mess everywhere. One of the other services that we kind of provide is mid-story thinnings, crop tree release. This is all TSI kind of work. So within, before harvesting, you want to, make improvements in your woodlands so that when you do get to a harvest scenario, that the crop that's below that's going to replace what you take out is desirable. We do this commonly. A lot of us consultants are commonly working in this scenario to implement these practices. So if you had 100 acres of forest and you wanted to get that improved from a species diversity standpoint, from a wildlife habitat standpoint, we come in and we'll implement that 100 acres of TSI work. There is also some cost share resources available through NRCS. I always encourage every landowner I've worked with, go ahead and establish a farm number on your property. That's with the Farm Service Agency, the FSA. And then once that is established, that makes you eligible for any farm bill grants, which there are a plethora of farm bill grants available to private landowners. And most private landowners aren't aware. There's monetary incentive to help offset the cost for doing these improvements on your property so that you can pay a consultant or a vendor to implement these things. Let's see, this is an example of what the NRCS calls it a forest stand improvement. It's synonymous with a timber stand improvement, a TSI, an FSI. This is a job sheet from NRCS, and then their map that they generate that they would give to the landowner or the vendor, the consultant in this case. This is a project I'm working on currently in Rockcastle County, and given the scope of the acreage, we kind of divided the parcels up and to implement certain acreages over certain years, and NRCS can work with you to do that so that you're not overwhelmed, and you have the ability and the resources to get that stuff implemented on the ground, which it can be overwhelming when you're trying to tackle a big project like this. This is just kind of a breakdown, and I know most of you guys probably seen this. I've kind of seen this before, but like James said, most of Kentucky is privately owned. A large percentage of it. So the private landowner is really the driver for ecology and resource development and all that kind of stuff in the state. So there's a lot of responsibility for people that own forest in Kentucky, to manage those forests. And that just kind of gives you a breakdown of what the ownership is in Kentucky. This slide I threw in, it shows ownership by type and family, which I don't know how well y'all can see this slide, but the family is the green, the light green. That's the largest ownership, especially in the East. As you get out west, you get into a lot more federal, and then TIMO and corporate ownerships in the Southeast, and in Texas as well. But Kentucky, for the most part, is privately owned. And then these are some of the reasons that people in Kentucky own land, own forest lands. They like the beauty of having forested surroundings. They like wildlife habitat. They're either hunting or they like being around wildlife and promoting that, protecting nature. A lot of it's inherited throughout generations, and it's a family legacy property that's been in the family for over a century and a long time, and then a lot of people just like to be secluded a little bit. And water protection. I know Billy mentioned this last night on the Woodland Short Course. Berea College owns a large forested parcel and almost entirely for water production. They produce freshwater resources for the town of Berea and the college. And that's done through the preservation of that forest. And then you got land investment and, people that like to hunt and recreate on forest lands. And then, people, when we mention with management plans, there's objectives for owning these properties. And these are some of the objectives, wildlife habitat. But 10% of the people in Kentucky cite timber production as an objective on their property. I don't know how accurate that stat is, but a lot of people, timber is obviously a renewable resource that we utilize all the time in America and Kentucky. So it's an important objective. So it's something to consider when you're looking at your forest. Here's a breakdown of how, and this might be a little outdated, but it might be a little heavy even, like of people that own private forest in Kentucky, only 11%, which, Billy and I talked about this slide the other day. This might be closer to like 3 to 5% have a written forest management plan for their property. The management plan is pretty crucial in that if you own something and you don't know what exactly it is, and then you go to sell that, it's difficult to actually know what the value of that is. So I encourage anybody that owns property, forest lands especially, have those inventoried, have a management plan on there, have an objective of what you're doing and why you're doing it and what your outcome, you perceive it to be or what you want it to be, and then implement those things along the way so that you can get to it. This is just a slide that kind of outlines the decision making on private lands. Like we kind of said, most timber harvesting on private lands occurs without a management plan, without professional oversight by a consultant or even another natural resource representative. And silviculture is not very commonly, what's the word? Not really thought about when harvesting occurs. Significant, especially given that it's a renewable resource and the intention is to harvest those lands again. Most of Kentucky has already been harvested, and poorly harvested sites are very easy to identify because of lack of diversity, lack of habitat, lack of species, composition, and all those things. This is kind of just a regional forest type. So in Kentucky, we have predominantly an oak hickory forest type, which is, common throughout the state. We have some river bottoms and, some other areas that are more prone for maple beech. The elm, ash, cottonwood kind of runs along the rivers. But predominantly Kentucky produces high quality oak, high quality hickory, high quality walnut. We are a premier hardwood state in the United States. So I know a lot of people industries come here to acquire those properties or acquire those hardwoods. Here's kind of some of the successes that have happened over the last few years in Kentucky. We've established, as James mentioned, the Kentucky Forest Conservation Act, which has requirements within the state to reclaim and restore harvested sites during harvest. So there's BMPs that have to be established, best management practices. The Master Logger Program was established, which requires loggers to be trained through a 3-day training class. The master loggers are required to be on site and in charge of logging jobs by law. And then the act also mandates master loggers maintain CEUs, just like we have for Association of Consulting Foresters. Let's see. Some of the challenges in Kentucky, which is something that we've been talking about a lot, especially with the White Oak Initiative. As we said earlier, Kentucky's forests are primarily oak hickory forest types. Those forest types are hard to regenerate. And the fact is that shade tolerant species such as beech and maple tend to dominate the understories of these forest types. And when you release that canopy, those trees will reclaim that canopy space. So without FSI or TSI management on the property, you're going to convert that forest type. And that's not something that we're trying to do. We're trying to maintain our oak hickory. And again, the majority of the forest land in Kentucky is not managed. Some opportunities from going through this with a consultant forester or a natural resource conservation service provider or natural resource provider, you increase that demand for oak products. People still come here. Obviously the white oak is highly sought after for whiskey barrels. Something I mentioned earlier is Natural Resource Conservation Service offers funding for private landowners to implement some of this stuff, the TSI, the FSI, the silvicultural practices. And a good forest industry in Kentucky is good for everybody in Kentucky. So we want to maintain that as best we can and keep that train rolling. And then here's some questions that kind of came up at the end. There's no obligation, for private landowners to sustain the forest that they have, or even have the sustainable forestry harvesting practices. There are obligations to maintain, primarily for water quality, all the VMPs and prevent erosion. Another question that's come up here a lot lately with consultants, and another service we provide, is carbon cruising. There is payments available for private landowners for carbon sequestration. If you maintain a forest type, there's carbon that's sequestered from the environment, and then there's payments that are associated from that. I didn't get into that too much, but that's an opportunity that can be discussed with a consultant if you have them on site. And then, timber values are constantly increasing. We've seen a big spike in the value of oak and walnut and all those species along the way. So you have more value in your woods than a lot of people realize. It's something to definitely consider. Let's see. That's about the end of what I've got to present for you guys.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. We really appreciate that presentation. We have a lot of people that have asked, what does a consulting forester do? And I think now they'll have a better knowledge of what you all actually do out there.
Well, thanks, Renee. Yeah, I hope, we can get more outreach out there. There's only 19 of us, but we're all willing to work.
Yeah, you all play such an important role for our landowners, Mike. And so big thanks to Kentucky Association of Consultant Foresters. And we will have you all on tomorrow night in our Woodland Owner Short Course. Mike will be talking about some of this stuff as well. Mike, again, and we always recommend folks that if they don't know what they're doing and when they're trying to sell timber, a consultant forester is usually a good place to start. And you have always done a good job kind of helping these landowners. So big thanks to that.
Thanks, Billy.
We appreciate you being on.
All right. Somebody says, how do I find a consulting forester to look at my property? Yeah, so we can drop that. Mike, if you'll drop your all's website into the chat, we'll put it in there for you, but it's kyacf.org.
I will. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so you just and Joe, on that question, we often encourage, as Mike said, to reach out to somebody local and maybe start there. Their expenses may be less if they're a little closer to you, but find somebody you're comfortable working with, explain your situation, and then you should be in good hands from there.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Good deal.
We'll get that in the chat pod, but
yeah.
So moving on to our next topic, we have had people that have called, they're like, I'm seeing like dead limbs in my trees. I'm seeing like all these cicadas everywhere. They're landing on me. I mean, it's like, what do I do? And so we're like, okay, we're going to bring in Dr. Ellen Crocker and Dr. Jonathan Larson to the show to kind of talk about this and say, is this going to kill my trees? We have pictures of some people have sent me, like they have bugs like just sitting on them where they're, we're on a tractor or what have you, and it's just like this cicada thing is crazy.
And I know that Dr. Larson has already talked with us about cicadas this year because we are having the bourbon boom, right? We're having our big periodic cicada emergence right now. And so, Jonathan, I know you were on here earlier talking cicadas, but that was before we started seeing the damage they were doing to trees, I think.
Yes, I'm here to defend the cicadas. I would say. I feel like this is crossfire, and I am here to defend them.
We Smalley in the good name of the cicadas. Yeah.
So we have back and forth. All right, this is awesome. Let's see how this goes.
No, I'm glad to have you both on here to talk about this. Yeah, because it's going to be on a lot of people's minds. And I know our county agents will appreciate it because I can imagine their phones and emails are blowing up with pictures and questions all across the state about what's wrong with my tree. So thank you all for covering this topic.
Really do appreciate it.
You bet. And a special thanks to Jonathan, Dr. Larson. We are so happy to have you on joining me for What's Bugging My Tree, a regular segment. This way we can approach it with two different perspectives, entomological and also kind of that tree health perspective on things. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So if you are seeing brown shoots on the end of your tree branches, like in this picture, it could be cicada damage, especially given that we are having a really big year for cicadas in this area. So in this edition of What's Bugging My Tree, we're going to talk about cicada damage, what it looks like, what it is, and what it means for your tree, as well as maybe what you can do about it. So I'm delighted to be joined by special guest entomologist Dr. Jonathan Larson to provide more information on cicadas. So what is cicada damage? Does this picture look familiar to you, Jonathan?
Absolutely. This is one that I think I have featured in at least a couple of different presentations. Pretty classic look at the ovipositor from a different angle on this particular cicada.
So when we're talking about cicada damage, cicadas cause damage to trees primarily through this egg-laying process. So we're seeing the ovipositor, which is what the cicada is using to lay those eggs in the tree, in their branches. And While this isn't really a major threat to mature, healthy trees, young or stressed trees might experience more significant impacts, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But we have cicadas every year in Kentucky and all over. You can find annual cicadas, dog day cicadas emerging, but this year is a different story, right? So what's happening this year?
Well, these are the periodical cicadas. So we've had the bourbon brood, as you alluded to before, or brood 14. They've come out in mass. There's millions, if not billions, of these insects out and about. So we do have annual cicadas that lay their eggs every year, but now we have a real surge in the population of cicadas. So there's more eggs going out. That requires more cuts into the tree. And so there's probably going to be more cicada damage than people are used to.
So you might see this kind of thing every year and not really notice it, like one little branch here or there, no big deal. But because we have so many cicadas this year, it's more evident. So you have your cicada, the females are laying their eggs on this small twig, and using this ovipositor to do that. So that kind of cuts these horizontal slits into the twigs, and the eggs are laid there. So here's a picture of some eggs. So those would be normally like inside of the branch, right? They're tiny, you're not going to see them.
People probably aren't going to locate these or find them. You're not going to notice them just sitting out and about. We're used to with some insect eggs like stink bug eggs and a few others that you see these kind of geometric patterns where they're laid on the tree. But these, the female, she has a very strong ovipositor. She pushes it down into that tree's bark and she's injecting those eggs right under the surface. So that way they're not seen, they're not drying out. They are nice and protected. They look like little grains of rice. I've seen a person eat them before and he said they were very sweet. I don't encourage that necessarily, but they are hidden and protected so that people can't do that.
A tasty little snack. Good to know. So when these hatch, they are going to be tiny little cicada nymphs, and then they're going to drop to the ground and burrow into the soil. And we won't see these periodical cicadas for another 17 years, right? So they're going to be there, though. They're going to be feeding on the roots of trees, around, but not something we're going to see for us for this one, 17 years. If you're dealing with a different periodical cicada in a different area, maybe 13 years, but it's going to be a while.
Yes, and the female, she's got about 500 eggs to lay. So as you go through some of these images, you'll see they don't put all 500 of them in one spot. They lay them in batches of about 2 dozen. So that's a lot of little slits that she has to cut into the bark in order to inject her eggs.
And they're going to be they live a long time, just not above ground where we see them, but as they're below ground, they're tunneling, they're feeding on tree roots. It's possible they could cause a little bit of damage to trees, but honestly, this is not a big deal. This is not what we're talking about today in terms of cicada damage to trees. This is probably really minor, and the trees can cope with it just fine. What we're talking about is what you might be seeing right now, right in the middle of this periodical cicada boom, damage to the above ground portion of those trees that's caused by that female laying her eggs. So, at least I don't think of the below ground action of those cicadas being an issue. How about you, Jonathan?
No, the feeding that they're doing down there is pretty minimal. They're not sucking enough sap out of the tree for the tree to really notice. They're very slow eaters. They take 17 years to grow underground. So it's not like there's this pulse of sap that's being pulled out of the tree constantly. It's pretty slow. But this, it does seem to happen like overnight. You go to bed and your tree seems very normal and fine. And then all of a sudden there are these kind of copper or brown patches appearing depending on the species of tree, kind of in the newer growth up towards the tippy top.
And I would call this flagging. So in it's like there's a literal flag like of dead branches or dead leaves in the tree, turning some different color. That is an obvious symptom that something's going on. And are we kind of right now in the peak of our cicada boom for the summer?
I would say so. It does seem like things are maybe kind of coming down on the other side of the roller coaster. I'm hearing fewer of them on the south side of town, and I'm noticing fewer of them kind of buzzing around. So I think that we're kind of, excuse the ambulance as it drives by, they're kind of coming down off of their high, but that means that the females will be turning to the trees to lay their eggs. And so the next round of things will be the flagging, as you mentioned.
So we'll see more of this. And anytime you got a big year for cicadas, this is something you can expect. So what you're seeing here is that the twigs and branch tips have been killed because you've had that female cicada laying her eggs below there. So they're going to many times kind of remain attached to the tree, at least for a little while. And you might see something like this, where all the new shoots of the tree, or many of them, have been killed. And if we were to look a little bit closer, you could see that sure enough, it's those individual shoots that have that damage. And if we look even a little bit closer to that, what you would see are the broken stems and the evidence that that female cicada has been laying her eggs there.
I actually just had an agent send me some images a moment ago of this, and she referred to it as stitching, which I think is very evocative of kind of what it looks like. The cicada is going down in a line and she's cutting these slits, and it does look like almost she's stitching her needle through the tree as she sows her eggs. And it does sometimes create enough damage that the twig, the branch, it will rip and tear and then flag even further and then fall to the ground, which is ideal for the baby cicadas that are going to come out. One of the questions that we get about this is, why does she put her eggs in the tree rather than in the soil if they're going to live in the soil anyway? And I can't explain that. That's just a quirk of evolution, basically. But this is a wetter and more protected area. It might be that that's just better for the egg overall. The ground could be dry and sort of shrivel those eggs up. But she's going to put them in there. They're going to hatch. Either the branch is going to fall down and then they'll scurry out of the branch and then dig their way into the ground, or if that doesn't happen, they have to march their way down the tree to the soil. And along the way, they get picked off by ants and all kinds of other things. So it's a very arduous process, no matter what life stage you're in as a periodical cicada. Everybody wants to eat you.
Oh yeah, yeah, including me. I've eaten a few this year, so.
Very good, very good.
So, here's a picture that you sent of showing that broken twig, and you can actually see the eggs inside, which is super cool. Maybe if you're really curious, you can go out and check some of your trees as well. And here's some of that stitching, those slits that are made by the female cicadas. So something to keep an eye out for. But maybe more apparent would be if you've got a whole bunch of leaves, and not just leaves, but the tips of those branches, because it's not going to be like a leaf here or there as much as these little branch tips that are scattered all over the ground around there. And, we did get a question from someone, do cicadas only eat on the tree they were first hatched from? And I know that they like to travel up things and find new locations. Do you want to talk about that?
They do go up and down pretty frequently, sort of as they come out of the ground and then where they're looking to molt their last exoskeleton. When they're in the soil, they can move sort of side to side in the soil profile. So they could go to a nearby tree, especially if the original tree they were feeding at is taken out, harvested, taken out by a flood or what have you. So they are mobile, they can move around, but it's not a great distance. So yeah, most likely they are going to kind of stay local. They'll live in the same hometown their whole life, basically, and that'll be their tree.
So another kind of related question is, which trees are impacted? A question that I've heard is, do they prefer certain species, or are they pretty generalist in their approach? And it seems like they can lay their eggs on all sorts of things. So deciduous trees are going to be a magnet for cicadas. Do they have any preferences or things that you've noticed?
Their favorite trees are oaks. They kind of like the longer lived species. Oaks represent that, I think, the best in this area. They also like things kind of in watersheds and water corridors. They like to be kind of near a creek or near a stream. And we often have a lot of oaks in those places as well. They'll use maples. One of the big questions we get every time this happens is with fruit trees. So they will go into orchards occasionally and wreak havoc. Historically, they also used elm and ash, but both of those have experienced sort of catastrophic invasive species. So I think it's really the oaks. That's kind of what we're most interested in, most concerned with here in Kentucky.
And do you ever see them in conifers, or is it just the hardwoods?
I've only ever seen them in the hardwoods. I haven't seen them use evergreens. I know that they'll crawl up evergreens. I've had pictures submitted from some junipers and some arborvitae earlier this year of them kind of crawling up those. I had people asking about ferns and things like that that they were sitting on. I don't think that they're using those as egg-laying hosts. If there's an image that somebody can produce of the slits, that would, of course, change my opinion on that. But for the most part, it seems like these bigger, more longer-lived hardwood species.
Excellent. And just a note that while we're showing pictures today of cicada damage, there are lots of other things that can kind of do the same thing in your trees. So right now I'm seeing a lot of fungal foliar issues in trees. We've had a really wet spring, so fungal leaf diseases are happening. And those might look a little bit different, but at a distance, you might see some similar symptoms flagging in the branches. This is one that I see more in the fall, but look how similar it looks to cicada damage, right? It looks very similar to everything we've talked about. This is Botryospermia canker, a disease. You might see insects doing very similar things, as well as even squirrels might result in, the tips of branches winding up on the ground. Other things, Dr. Larson, that you've seen that could be easily mixed up?
Sometimes just like wind damage and things like that. Anything that kind of cracks and creaks those things so they flag and hang in the tree. Sometimes we get questions about twig girdlers and things, twig pruners, but that usually is fallen out of the tree, so it looks more like your last image before of the kind of widespread carnage of everything laying on the ground. But if I were strolling around campus and I saw this tree, I would say that's cicada damage, but I am not a pathologist, so I would be incorrect.
And one thing you could do is, I mean, if you got questions, you could look a little bit more closely. So if I were to look close up at this one, I would see that I'm not seeing that cicada damage right here where it goes from dead to healthy. And I am seeing this tiny little sunken canker, and you can't really see it, but if you look up close, you could see it. Similar with some of those twig girdlers, you'd notice different ways in which that wood is damaged. If it's just dropping individual leaves and they have more different patterns of dead tissue on it, I might think a fungal foliar issue. So, look around and see what you can observe with that. But right now, we are seeing a lot of cicada damage because we have a lot of cicadas. So when it comes to kind of what do we do about this issue, for large trees, this might look bad, but the trees will likely bounce back and recover well. These periodical cicadas only appear in large groups once every 17 years for this group, maybe 13, depending on where you're located for a different year. A relatively rare occurrence. So they're going to kill some new shoots, but the trees have a long time to recover, and it's typically not a big issue. On the other hand, if we're talking about like small trees, recently planted trees, I could see this being more concerning, especially if it only has, one shoot, and that one shoot is killed by a cicada. Maybe the tree will recover, but it will have more impacts from that. How about you, Dr. Larson? Similar?
I would totally agree. I mean, we're talking about scope and scale, right? So if it's a mature, majestic 25-year-old oak tree out in your landscape, it has plenty of other canopy that wasn't affected, so it's still going to have green leaves. It'll bounce right back as long as it doesn't have a gaping wound or something down at the base, some other underlying issue. But then when you look at this smaller tree, we're talking about a much greater percentage of its canopy being affected, even if it had fewer numbers of cicadas on it. So that's when we get concerned. That's when we start telling people, if you planted the tree last year, if you run a tree nursery, I work with the nursery industry frequently, maybe it would behoove you to wrap this tree or to take some other steps, which I know you've got some cool pictures of too.
Well, and here's some pictures of some trees that are wrapped that I found, some fruit trees in someone's yard. And so I am not familiar if they're doing it right or if you have any other tips for them. But this is something to protect trees before they start having this damage. Once you've got all those dead shoots, it's a little late. I mean, you can still do it, but the damage has been done.
Right. The thing that I would say right now is it's better late than never. You probably still will have some damage. But if you put this netting on right now, you will prevent further damage from occurring. You don't want to net them in the tree, so you want to shake it a little bit before you actually enclose it. I like this image a lot because I talk about netting your tree, and you'll read people sort of give guides online, and it's always presented as this rather simple task, like you just wrap the tree up like a mummy and everything's great. But I think that this picture shows you there is some difficulty with this. I mean, you've got to enclose an entire tree. You have to figure out how to secure it. And even then, life finds a way. There's some tree branches that are poking out of parts of this wrapping. So it will help. It will prevent a lot of damage. It's not going to be 100%, but it is 100% organic and it's pure IPM. This is mechanically, or I would say physically excluding these species from being able to use this tree.
And you mentioned organic. Are there other options that people should consider or maybe try and aren't as effective?
I've had a lot of questions this year. So I've worked here for 6 years, and I would say 3 or 3.5 of those years I've had cicada questions. And this year I've had the most questions about wrapping the base of your tree in aluminum foil. People asking if that would prevent them from being able to get onto the branches. And I have to say, sadly, that I don't think that would help us very much because once they're winged, they're able to fly around in the branches from tree to tree. They're not really using the trunk to gain access to those upper limbs. So I don't think that's going to be very helpful. It would look interesting. Maybe it would prevent some other problems, but I don't think that that's going to help you with cicadas. There are sprays that we can use. There's not going to be a lot of organic options. We would be talking about much heavier duty insecticides, things that are contact products. And these are things that I'm wary of telling the average homeowner, yeah, climb on a ladder and spray this 4 feet up into the air while it drifts back onto you, because they're not always the safest of things for that kind of application. So this is the way that we want homeowners to approach this issue. If you are a woodland owner, if you are a tree nursery owner, an orchard owner, we do have other pieces of advice that we might provide that would involve some heavier duty insecticides. But I'm also trying to preserve these insects. I hope I don't sound too cagey when I'm giving this answer because I think it's important that we protect them. They're the guardians of time down underground. There are our teenage bugs that come out. And I think it's worthwhile to sort of sacrifice some of our tree branches, tree limbs, tree twigs, whatever you want to call it, to them. And if we can't afford that, then we can use this mechanical method here.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, it's not needed. These trees are going to be fine in a forest setting. This is not going to be an issue for the health of those trees. In a home landscape setting, this is not going to be something that for your larger trees is going to change the health trajectory for that tree. But maybe if you've got a smaller tree in your home landscape and you just planted it, this is any time, but especially this year, you might want to take good care of it. You might want to mulch around the tree and make sure it's protected and from mower damage, as well as creating the right conditions around it, just giving it every advantage you can. Right now, it feels like it's been raining a lot, but if we hit some dry weather, make sure you're watering it properly, giving it that extra support. And that's true anytime for a newly planted tree, but maybe especially this year as it might have to deal with some added stress. In addition, if you were planting some big tree planting for this summer, you may want to reconsider that. But summertime really isn't the best time for tree planting anyway. So hold off until the fall or even the following spring and you'll be better off. With that, hopefully you learned a little bit more about cicadas and the damage you're seeing in trees. And while we may be having this major year for these periodical cicadas, it's good to remember that this only happens once every 17 years. And in most cases is not a problem. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this rare, although maybe a little bit loud, natural spectacle that we have. I'm with you, Dr. Larson, in that I'm enjoying the cicadas, or at least telling myself that I'm enjoying their beautiful sounds very loudly, because I know it's going to be short. I know it's going to be short, brief
My
event.
daughter is sitting outside trying to learn how to communicate with them. She's screaming at them just like they're screaming at her. It's a very interesting biological phenomenon. You were stressing it only happens every 17 years. That makes it unique in the entire natural world. It's really something that other people seek to experience. I know that we are living in it, and so that's a little different than doing some visits and doing cicada tourism. But I hope that people can kind of step back from their primary mode of, well, why is this happening to me? Thinking and think, why is this so beautiful? Why is this so weird? Why is this so wonderful? And hopefully be a little appreciative of our little clock keepers here that are out screaming in the trees and laying their eggs.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining me today. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to share those. We did get one about when the branches fall out of the tree. So you've got those cicada cut branches. If they fall on the ground, should someone pick them up and remove them from a sanitation perspective if they don't want to have more cicadas in the future? My first thought is that you still might have cicadas fly in, and the damage underground isn't really the problem. And even the damage above ground is not a big problem, but they could still come in from elsewhere. But what are your thoughts on that, Dr. Larson?
I would say if the branch is on the ground like that, if you pick it up and throw it to the side, they will still be able to hatch and go down below ground, and you can preserve that particular clutch of eggs. If you're trying to stop the cicadas with sanitation, no, because there's still going to be so many other ones up in the tree that were laid, and there's going to be so many more eggs that are going to hatch. You're not going to be able to stop it. So mulching those branches in or burning them, it might feel cathartic, but you've really only got maybe 400 of the 125,000 eggs that were laid in that particular tree.
I have a question too. You had mentioned during our cicada talk that some of these cicadas can't tell time and they're off a little bit.
Yes.
So, are there going to be maybe next year or the year after some of these that messed up?
Yes, absolutely. Next year, we will see some stragglers that will come out here in the central and eastern Kentucky area. They'll be a year off. There'll be enough of them that they'll be like, okay, this is okay. We can still mate and still create more cicadas. But after that, it probably wouldn't be until about 3 years from now, maybe 4 years from now, that we would see other stragglers come out. I have a hot spot of periodical cicadas in my backyard, and I feel blessed for that. But I get to go out and sort of see these stragglers, and it's usually 1 or 3 years that they seem to be off, either plus or minus. So there's probably going to be some next year, maybe some in a few years, but it'll be much quieter and much less damage than what we're going to see this year.
I was sitting on my back porch this weekend and I noticed dragonflies were chasing them. Have you ever seen
Interesting.
that?
I
Yeah, I mean
haven't.
several, like 5 or 6. I thought, well, it's just that one, but no, I saw several and they're like after them. Of course, birds are dive bombing them too, trying to catch them, but I was surprised at the dragonflies that do they eat them?
They must try to. I would be surprised if they got very far because they're usually catching smaller prey like mosquitoes and flies and things like that. But if I were a dragonfly, if I saw a big juicy cicada, I'd give it a shot. I'd go after that.
So everything just wants to eat them, like you said, right?
Yes, absolutely. They're a walking meal for so many things out there. And yeah, I've sat in my backyard a few times with my headphones, or not my headphones, like my ear protection on,
Uh-huh.
and I'm drinking something and reading a book and enjoying myself. And then little wings will flutter around me, and I'll realize that there's a bird above me eating my cicada friends, and I get a little sad.
I've actually got a picture of my husband with a cicada on his shoulder going, because it just kind of landed right on him. I'm like, oh, let me take that. We might use it.
We've had some questions about why they're landing on people, and some people have asked about colors of shirts, if they like certain colors. It's
Mhm.
not the color, it's the noises that are being made. So in that image I think you shared, was he on a mower?
Oh, that was a different one,
Oh, that
but
was a different one?
yeah, but that was a woodland owner that sent it to us last night. Yeah, he was on
Oh,
a
okay.
mower.
If you're
Looks
on
like
a mower, if you have a weed whacker, if you have like a saw in your hand, a chainsaw, a circular saw, any of those things, that vibration and frequency that those things make, it actually attracts the cicadas, and they think that you're like the loudest dude cicada in town, and they're like, this guy, he's got the band, he's got the music, and so they'll start hanging out on you, trying to pal up with you.
The romantic sounds of the chainsaw ringing again.
Oh, hey, I'll remind folks that Dr. Larson does have a whole segment that we did, I think,
Mhm.
real recently on FromTheWoodsToday.com. You can check it out there, and it gives a really fascinating kind of life history of these things. Yeah, check it out if you did not see that. You won't want to miss it.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Crocker and Dr. Larson, for being on. We appreciate you as always, and I know we'll have you back again.
Yeah, good stuff. Wow.
Stuff. Yeah. Awesome.
I
Well,
know.
really great show, Billy. I mean, it was very informative all the way around.
Yeah, big thanks to our guests. We had two first timers today, which is always exciting. We had Mr. James Wright, the new director of the Kentucky Forest Industry Association, and then the chair of the Kentucky Association of Consulting Foresters, Mr. Mike Silliman. So really appreciate both those being on. And then again, don't worry too much about your trees right now with the cicada damage, right? Unless there's something kind of special going on, it's going to be okay. So really appreciate Dr. Larson and Dr. Crocker for all they do for woodland owners here in the state, but also for our show here from the Woods Today.
Right. We really appreciate you too, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be doing a show. So
Yeah, we wouldn't invite them here if it wasn't for you, right? Yeah.
exactly. Someone asked about cicadas damage, so we put it on. So thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you all next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
From the woods today. From the woods today.